Welcome to Fangirl Football. I'm Judy.
I'm Tiffany.
And I'm Lauren.
Welcome to today's episode. We've got all the insights you need on the top waiver wire pickups to strengthen your roster. If you're wondering why you need the waiver wire, you could have injuries to players on your team, or you just may be looking to replace that player who isn't performing up to expectations. Maybe you picked up a player last week that now didn't perform this week or is now injured and you need to find someone else new. Another reason is just a bad matchup, and you are looking to make it through the week. You may also be dealing with bye weeks, which we have teams on bye week this week. If you have players on the Lions, Chargers, Eagles, and Titans, all are on bye in week 5. If you are planning ahead, week 6 will have the Chiefs, Rams, Dolphins, and Vikings on a bye. You got any that you need to find an exchange for, Judy?
You know, I haven't looked, which is bad of me. I need to be looking to see if I've got any on bye. I do know, actually, I have Amon-Ra St. Brown on bye. So I will need to be looking for somebody to replace him for sure, which is going to be hard to fill his shoes. We'll see who else I have. Well, let's get started with quarterbacks. And if you're looking to pick up a quarterback because maybe you've got one on one of those buys or injured, I don't think we have a lot of quarterbacks that are injured. Jordan Love came back this week, so we're pretty stable on quarterbacks other than you might be having one that doesn't perform quite as well. Geno Smith is 56% available in leagues still. And I know we mentioned him last week, but apparently not everyone needed a quarterback or they weren't running out to grab him. So he's still playing well this season. He actually hasn't played since we talked about him last week because he plays tonight. We're recording this before the game's on Monday. So he should have a really good game, I'm expecting, against the Lions. I think he'll have to be passing a lot. So fantasy production-wise, he should have a good game. And in week 5, he gets a great matchup. He gets to play the New York Giants with a weak pass defense. So I like him again for this week.
And then Justin Fields is your other option, right?
He is. And, you know, I like Justin Fields in preseason. Everyone was going down the road to Russell Wilson, but I was like, yeah, I could stash Fields. And I had him in some best ball leagues, which has worked out pretty well for me. So Justin Fields, the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback, is 69% available in leagues. And he's coming off a loss to Indianapolis on Sunday, but he put up an amazing fantasy performance and scored 33 fantasy points. He was quarterback 1 for the week, at least so far, before the 4 teams play tonight on Monday. Next up, he's playing Dallas. It is a home game for him, so I do like home quarterback. So if I was going to pick him up, I do like that matchup. I do think he's going to have to pass a lot in that matchup against the Cowboys. And I feel like that's why we saw his really big week of 33 fantasy points against the Colts, because the Steelers fell behind early. The Steelers, who had only allowed 10 points per game while they were getting blown out before the first quarter was over in the game against the Colts. And I think we'll expect the same to occur when the Steelers face the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys defense has given up points, and the Dallas Cowboys offense is capable of scoring points. So I like this matchup for Justin Fields.
Are there any other available quarterbacks that maybe I should look for? I know Justin Fields and Geno Smith are probably available, but in case they aren't.
Yeah, there's some other ones. I just like these two the best. So the other ones include Derek Carr for the New Orleans Saints, but they face a good Kansas City defense, and they're playing in Kansas City week 5, so I don't really like that as well. And then we have Andy Dalton, who I believe we also talked about last week with the Carolina Panthers, but he has to travel to Chicago and play the Bears, and the Bears defense has been pretty good, so I don't like that matchup either. If you're really desperate, you could go check out Joe Flacco with the Indianapolis Colts. We don't really know right now if Anthony Richardson's going to be able to play, but if I had to speculate, I think he's going to be out this week. That's my pure speculation because Anthony Richardson has that history of injury. So I think they might try to give him a week off and play Flacco again.
Well, speaking of the Colts, let's talk about running backs, because I think there's an Indianapolis Colts running back that might be a good pickup if you need a running back.
There is. So Trey Sermon, there was an injury also to Jonathan Taylor. So the Colts game on Sunday, they lost both Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor to injuries. Jonathan Taylor has a high ankle sprain, and we know he has a history of high ankle sprains. He didn't get placed on IR, so we expect him back on the shorter side of that, but I believe he'll be missing at least a couple games with that ankle sprain. The Colts like to run the ball. And even if Anthony Richardson does get to play on Sunday, he's going to be less mobile than he normally is when he's healthy. And so they're really going to have to count on a running back like Trey Sermon. Then Colts also are pretty much all their eggs in one basket at running back. So they don't share like we see on so many other teams. And Trey Sermon's the next player up. Behind him, they don't really have a lot. They have an undrafted free agent with Tyler Goodson, and he probably will see some work. He's 23 and he spent last year with the Colts, but there's just not a lot there. After that, you're going to the practice squad.
And the
So I
Colts
like,
have a easier schedule maybe for the next 2 weeks, Jacksonville in week 5 and Tennessee in week 6. So if you're looking for a running back and he's 99% available.
he is, and I just like him from sheer volume. I mean, if your player's getting the ball, at least you've got a chance of getting some points. So I like just the volume here with Trey Sermon and that quarterback situation as well, because if Anthony Richardson doesn't play and it's Joe Flacco, he is a traditional quarterback and is going to be dependent on that running back, and Trey Sermon is going to get fed the ball. So then it's going to become, can the offensive line do their job and block for him? Let's move on to another running back. So Roschon Johnson in Chicago, he is 72% available. I like how Roschon Johnson is running, and he's already taken over the number 2 spot from Khalil Herbert. And had DeAndre Swift not broken out in his long run for a touchdown on Sunday, he may have been able to have a shot at the top job. So picking up Roschon Johnson right now, you might be not getting everything that you want at this point in the season, but I feel like he has great potential down the road for these games. He does get goal line carries, and therefore he always has the touchdown option upside. Next game up is home against the Panthers. So I like his matchup this week as well. And I can see both of these running backs having a shot, but Roschon Johnson's had the hot hand, and the Bears have looked to go to him repeatedly. So I like this pickup. And again, he's 72% available in leagues.
And then there's Kareem Hunt with Kansas City at 65% available.
Yeah, when he got signed, people must have gone out and snatched him up for 35% to already have him in leagues. It's kind of weird, because he hadn't really done anything until Sunday. And on Sunday, we weren't really sure what his workload was going to be, but he ended up getting 14 rushing attempts and 3 passing targets. So it was okay. He had something there, some production. Kansas City plays at home on Sunday, hosting New Orleans. So they may be pushed a little bit more. And I like that Kareem Hunt is involved in the passing game. They do have a bye in week 6. So you're really picking him up this week, see what happens. And then the one thing that I would like to remind everyone about is Clyde Edwards-Helaire was placed on IR before the season started after dealing with some mental health issues. And we could see him return as early as week 5. So we'll be looking on Tuesday to see if he gets activated or if they're going to let him have another week and try to bring him back maybe after their bye week in week 6. The Chiefs did lose a wide receiver. They lost Rashid Rice on Sunday to what looks to be an ACL and perhaps a season ending injury. So they're dealing with a slew of injuries with Pacheco and Rashid Rice, and Hollywood Brown all going out. They need all the help they can get, so that's why Kareem Hunt is in here, but if they bring back Clyde Edwards-Helaire, we'll see how much workload and the share that they end up bringing, but the other 2 running backs that they had for the weeks prior to this in Carson Steele and Samaje Perine. They just weren't getting it done. So you could safely, I think, drop either one of them and pick up either Kareem Hunt, or you could gamble on Clyde Edwards-Helaire coming back and try to stash him away too. If you drafted Zamir White on the Las Vegas Raiders or another underperforming running back, you might take a chance on one of these guys and look for an upgrade.
Let's chat wide receivers, because I know that there are some injuries going around with wide receivers, like we just mentioned with Rashid Rice.
There are, and then we had Malik Neighbors have a concussion. I think we have a couple others out with concussions as well. So you're always looking for a new wide receiver to sub in, especially when we've got those bye weeks happening, like coming up. Some of the ones that we've got on the list today, we've got Dontayvion Wicks with the Green Bay Packers, and he is 86% available in leagues. Jordan Love returned to play this past Sunday in their loss to the Minnesota Vikings, but he threw 54 times in their loss to the Vikings. He can't throw 54 times each week, but if he does, then we need to be stocking up on the wide receivers and the tight ends. I'm going to have a tight end from Green Bay coming up as well, because the Packers also lost one of their wide receivers to an ankle injury. Christian Watson ended up leaving the game with an ankle injury, and he's often injured, and there are rumors of IR for this ankle injury. So you can bring in any of the Green Bay wide receivers that you can find available. He'll be behind Jaden Reed and have to share. But Wicks had an amazing game on Sunday with 24% of the target share and 2 touchdowns in that loss. So I like bringing in the Packers.
A healthy amount of target share, and he's 86% available. So likely available if you need a wide receiver.
Yeah, and he's on a winning team. I mean, the Packers look good this year, and I tend to weigh that a little bit better than our next wide receiver. So next I've got up Wan'Dale Robinson with the New York Giants, and he's 74% available. But the Giants are on that losing side. They are usually playing from behind, but their quarterback, Daniel Jones, is just struggling, and he doesn't make me want to have the wide receivers. But, Neighbors went out on a concussion. And so this week, there's a good chance that Malik Neighbors won't get to play. He does have the chance because they did play on Thursday night when he suffered that concussion. So it's a little bit longer. It's the 10-day time frame, and we'll see if he makes it back. But this year, I feel like we're really seeing more and more teams give extra time to concussions, and so he may not make it back. Either way, Wan'Dale was getting a good share of the targets, even when Malik Neighbors was in there. And coming up next for the Giants, they have to play in Seattle, and then they play Cincinnati and Philadelphia at home. And the Seattle one I don't like so much. You're going on the road, but they're going to be behind. That's guaranteed. So they're going to be throwing the ball. And I like that option. It just puts him in a good space. So he's a good pickup.
And Malik Neighbors has been putting up good fantasy points the last couple of weeks prior to the concussion. So if all that transfers, I guess how much of it is, can Wan'Dale catch the ball and hold on to it?
Yeah. And can Daniel Jones even get the ball off? So he's an option. If you need somebody to fill in, he's going to get you some points. Another one that we talked about last week, but nobody went out and picked up except you, Lauren. I think you played them this week, or you at least played them in daily fantasy, is Xavier Leggett with the Carolina Panthers. And he's still available in 86% of the leagues. That's kind of amazing to me because he has proven with Thielen out that he is stepping up and, having a good game. They still have Deontay Johnson, but I really like Leggett because he is a big physical wide receiver. He's 6'3", 227, and he can fight for that ball. This week, he saw 25% of the target share with Andy Dalton in at quarterback. So if, Bryce Young would have to come back, we would downgrade all the Panthers wide receivers. But with Andy Dalton in there, I like this. And then Carolina this week plays Philadelphia, Then they play Dallas, and then they play Arizona, and I none of those are scary defenses, but the offenses are good enough that they're gonna have to throw the ball as well. So I like all of those matchups.
Then there's Jerry Jeudy, 52% available on Cleveland. I think we only like because of the match.
Exactly. Yeah, this week he gets to play Washington and then Philadelphia and then Cincinnati. You kinda are hearing the trend here. Anyone that's playing, Philadelphia, Cincinnati, Washington, I like all of those matchups because the offenses can score and put you in a hole, and then you have to throw. The problem with Judy is he's dealing with Deshaun Watson, who actually had a decent game this past weekend, and Judy's only 52% available. He is one of the better wide receivers here. But with their matchups, he's definitely one that you could look to pick up and, put in place of somebody that was having a bad matchup if you can afford to do that. We have one more wide receiver to mention, and he's only 53% available too, and that's Darnell Mooney on the Falcons. I tend to stay away from the Falcons. I think we've already established that I'm kind of all out, especially on Bijan. I'm done with the Falcons, but Darnell Mooney is probably my exception. And he is the best wide receiver, I will say, on the Falcons team. I like him better than Drake London, anyone. And Kirk Cousins is going to him more and more because he is dependable and he is a good wide receiver. Next up, they play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, then they play Carolina, and then they play Seattle. So they're going to need their pass attack. And I like Darnell Mooney because of that. Do you need a wide receiver this week?
I do, with Neighbors on on out from the concussion. I do need a wide receiver this week. But I mean, also kind of continuing that Atlanta week 4, Kyle Pitts, tight end for Atlanta, delivered a goose egg, no points.
Yeah, I can't believe that Kyle Pitts got a goose egg. I played him. I thought he had a good matchup, and I could not believe that he was only targeted 3 times, and he didn't catch any of them. This is again, I'm just kinda checking out on the whole Atlanta offense because I'm kind of done making excuses for why they underperform, but they tend to underperform. That's kind of a general theme, though, for all tight ends this year. So we haven't been seeing the big scores from even the top 3 tight ends, and there are a lot of injuries at the tight end position, but this week, the top tight end score for the week before the Monday night game is 14.3 FanDuel points, and that went to Tucker Kraft, who is on our available list and our waiver wire list because he's available in 90% of the leagues. Now we have to go back to that whole statement about Jordan Love throwing the ball 54 times. And if you're throwing the ball 54 times, then everybody gets more touches. So, we'll have to caveat as that. But he is definitely stepping up to be the top tight end in Green Bay over Luke Musgrave. And even if we don't see as many attempts, I think we will still see Tucker Kraft being involved in that offense. And next, Green Bay is at the Los Angeles Rams. And then they go back to Green Bay and they get to host the Arizona Cardinals and the Houston Texans. So I like those matchups. Not big matchup, and I don't really love that matchup against the Rams. The Rams defense can step up, although they can also just have a meltdown, but it is in Los Angeles. But the games against the Cardinals and Texans at home, I think you can definitely, if you're in need, if you got Kyle Pitts, you might just try dropping him and going to Tucker Kraft. It's really hard for me to drop Kyle Pitts because I drafted him in like the 5th round or something stupid. But at some point, you just have to go, "This isn't gonna work," and move on, and maybe that's moving on means to Tucker Kraft.
Especially because I feel like with tight ends, I only drafted one. I didn't wanna spend a lot on drafting tight ends, so I drafted one, and if that one isn't performing, then time to pick up someone new and let go of the person that was there.
Yeah, that's mostly true. You usually draft 1. Most of my leagues, I only draft 1. I got kinda crazy in one league where the draft wasn't going well, and I drafted 3, and that's the one where I have Kyle Pitts, so at least I have other options of who to start. But they were just, like, the best player up, and that's who I ended up taking, but I'm ready to move on from Pitts, maybe Tucker
Anyone
Kraft.
else with how tight ends are performing?
Yeah, you could take a chance on Colby Parkinson for the Los Angeles Rams, and they'll be going up against Green Bay Packers. So the other side of that ball, I like that matchup at home. They're both gonna probably be throwing, and half they may be behind to the Green Bay Packers because Packers have been good this year, especially with Love. They did lose to the Minnesota Vikings, but everyone's lost to the Minnesota Vikings, so I can't hold that too much against them. After this week, the Rams have a bye, and then they get Vegas in week 7. So those are pretty good matchups for Colby Parkinson. But with all the injuries to their wide receivers, they've had to think kind of outside the box and involve more players. And it can't just all be Karen Williams. So we'll see if Colby Parkinson can take up some of those snaps and production. How about defenses? Are you streaming defenses this year?
I had planned to, and then I've kind of just kept the Falcons. And yesterday they got me 20 points, so I can't complain about that. Very happy with that. But in case you are streaming, who should I be looking at this week?
So I like the Denver Broncos. They should be 84% available. And the Broncos will host the Las Vegas Raiders in week 5. And then they get the Los Angeles Chargers in week 6, who are really beat up. And we're not really sure if Justin Herbert's going to get to play this week or not. The Broncos are allowing an average of 13.8 points a game, and they looked great in that win over the Jets on Sunday. Although that was a horrible game to watch. It was 10-9. And at one point, they had held Brees Hall to 10 carries and only 4 yards on 10 carries. I had to make sure that Brees Hall wasn't injured or something else going on because it was just so unreal, the stats that I was seeing from the Denver Broncos defense. So they're a great option.
I played them in my daily fantasy this past weekend and was pleasantly surprised. I had kind of picked it up, not expecting much, and then got a good amount of points out of them as well.
Yeah, that's definitely a good pickup this past week and the one coming up. So you might, well, you said daily. You don't want to, you're not holding on to them, but
Not
don't
holding
know
on
who
to
the
them.
Falcons are playing this week. Um,
Tampa Bay.
another, oh,
They're-
I don't, yeah, I don't think I like that matchup, but maybe you should
I
pick
might
up
be
the
picking up
Broncos.
the Seahawks instead because with their changes in coaching, they seem to have changed some on the defense too and are 75% available.
They do. They have a really great matchup. They're hosting the New York Giants week 5 in Seattle. And Daniel Jones has just been a turnover machine, throwing an interception in 3 of his first 4 games, and he's been sacked 9 times. And that Seahawks defense has looked really, really good. So they may just eat up Daniel Jones and spit him out. And, Seattle's got that 12th man. It's going to be loud there. I can just see this going really, really badly for the New York Giants. But you can take advantage of that and pick up the Seattle Seahawks. When I looked this afternoon, both of these defenses were available in all of my leagues.
I might be heading to the waiver wire right after this then.
Yeah, it's funny because we're talking about this before the games tonight, and so the Seahawks actually haven't played, so you don't even really need to wait for the waiver wire. You just have to have somebody open that you can drop that hasn't already played. And so I looked, and I didn't like the options that I had available to drop. Basically, that's anybody that's left to play tonight that I could drop and pick up the Seahawks. So that didn't happen. That is something to think about if you're going to be picking up somebody that hasn't played and you have an opening that you can do that before on Mondays before the waiver wires even happen on Tuesday night.
I definitely didn't realize you could do that.
You
Well, then
can.
right
You
after
just
this, I will be evaluating my lineup.
there you go. You might be able to pick up one of those defenses already.
Well, and if you're headed to the waiver wire this week, good luck in getting your players that you want. We'll see you tomorrow to discuss Thursday night's game, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Atlanta Falcons, and building lineups for that game.